A lot of people reach out to me interested in buying a home in Spain because it's something I talk about quite a bit after now buying and having sold a couple of homes, and then I have one that I just finished renovating. But what I find is there are some people who are looking to move to Spain, and then there are other people who are like me and considering living between two countries. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to share about my experience, but also just help you think through what might be best for you. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. On here, I share about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. So today I'm going to be covering several things, including what I love about living between two countries, some of the things that can obviously make that difficult. I want to talk about avoiding residency visas and kind of how you can do that. We will also talk about non-resident taxes, buying or renting a car in Spain, just depending on what that situation looks like for you. And then I'm also going to talk about securing internet and maintaining your property while you're away. And you'll want to stick around too because there have been some changes to non-resident taxes. This will specifically impact people who are one, looking to rent out their property while they are not there. But even if you aren't renting out the property, this impacts you too. So I'll be sharing about what some of that looks like. And then I'm also going to share exactly how I handle the complex financial logistics of this transatlantic lifestyle, which is exactly why this video is a paid partnership with Wise, my personal favorite international money transfer service. If you are planning to buy a house overseas, you have to figure out how to actually move your money without losing a fortune in hidden bank fees, because sending money with Wise is on average 2 times cheaper than with competitors. Later in this video, I will explain how Wise offers tools and support designed specifically for large transfers, including tiered volume discounts and a dedicated support specialist who will hold your hand through the entire process. If you click the unique tracking link in my description and pinned in the comments right now, you get your first transfer fee-free up to $600. So I want to start by first talking about how I ended up here with a couple of houses, right? One in the US and then one in Spain. And the truth of the matter is I'm really grateful, and I want to acknowledge how privileged I am to be able to live this life. I know it's not something that everyone is able to do. I know for me, it has been a very unique journey that started out kind of creatively. I get these big ideas and then try to really go for something. And so it wasn't something that I worked on for 10 or 20 years. And I really had to navigate how to do that on a budget, which is something I share a lot about on this channel. I wasn't coming from large amounts of money in my background, and I was figuring out how to build this life creatively. But regardless of whether you're ready to buy a 500,000 villa or you're looking for an affordable property, maybe in the $50,000 to $100,000 range that you can renovate, either way, a lot of these logistics are going to be the same. And so we're going to cover all of that today and really think about how these different areas may impact you. When sending large amounts of money internationally, for example, buying property abroad, relocating your family, or moving your entire life savings overseas, Wise offers incredible tools and support designed specifically for large transfers. In my experience, sending large amounts through a traditional bank often came with fees and exchange rate markups that weren't always made clear up front. And those costs added up more than I expected. I learned this the hard way on my very first house purchase back in 2018 when I sent €2,000 reservation deposit through my traditional US bank. And between the flat wire fees and the awful exchange rate, it cost me way more than I had anticipated. That awful experience is exactly why I immediately switched to Wise. What I love about Wise is that you can see exactly what you're paying, the fee and the exchange rate before you even hit send. No surprises, no markups that only show up after the fact. For large, life-changing transfers, this level of total transparency can mean saving a meaningful amount of money compared to traditional bank transfers. But here's the absolute best part about using them for real estate and luxury purchases. Wise offers tiered volume discounts for larger transfers, meaning the more you send, the more you can save. At this time, transfers of 25,000 US dollars or more trigger volume discounting. When you initiate a transfer, Wise automatically shows the discounted pricing at larger amounts directly in the app. Or you can see the savings using the Wise online calculator, which clearly displays how much you save at each transfer amount so you know exactly what the discount is. Furthermore, when sending larger amounts, Wise provides direct access to a dedicated support specialist who can guide you through the entire process. Do not forget to sign up using the unique tracking link in the description to get your first transfer fee-free up to 600 US dollars. Okay, so next I want to talk about navigating visas and really strategic timing. So if you're not familiar, within a lot of the EU, there is something called the Schengen zone. And this really impacts those who are wanting to travel to Europe for more than 3 months at a time. So it can be a little bit tricky when you want to spend more time in Europe overall. Maybe you're not just wanting to be in Spain. But for me, it's like I want to spend quite a bit of time in Spain, but I'd also love to spend time visiting some of these other countries. So you have to figure out how to fit it all into 90 days within a 180-day period. So your total amount of time is a roughly 6 months per year that you can spend in Spain or in the entire Schengen area, and you've got to split that up into two different 3 month blocks. So that is the first thing that you want to kind of keep in mind, because anything over that 90 days is going to mean you've overstayed your welcome. And other than overstaying your welcome, you would need a visa for something like that. Now, there are certain visas available in Spain. Some of the really common ones recently have been the digital nomad visa or the non-lucrative visa. And I'm not a visa expert. I sort of know the highlight points about those, but we're not going to dig into that today because that's more for people who are looking to stay longer. And today we're talking about those of you who are planning to do or thinking about doing something like I have been, which is coming and going twice per year. So one of the things about this that has really worked for me is that I go in the spring and in the fall to Spain. And then, of course, my place is in Florida here. So I spend a bit of the summer in Florida as well as traveling to other places in the US to visit friends and family. And then I spend my winters here, which is my favorite time in Florida. So that comes in really handy here because it's really beautiful here in the winter. So there are a couple of things that for me are reasons why I don't really want to be in Spain during the summer. Part of it is that I just really love the spring and fall. But one of the other things is that I'm avoiding the major tourist season because a lot of people spend their summer vacations in Spain. As a matter of fact, nearby coastal cities like Denia, for example, it doubles in population during the summer versus what it's like in the shoulder seasons. And so it's already a busy town anyway, but it gets a lot busier during that time of year. And by avoiding the tourist season, I'm also avoiding higher prices on things like flights, rental cars. And another reason I personally don't like to spend summers in Spain is because of the brutal heat. There was only one summer that I went, so it's probably not like this every summer, but there were a couple of years where it was well over 100 degrees for multiple days in a row. I went for around 10 days one July, and all I wanted to do was lay under the air conditioner in the one room where I had one at the time. And so that's another thing kind of about summers is that central air conditioning is not super common in Spain. You do have many split units in a lot of homes, but Spain didn't used to get quite as hot, at least in our area. And so I feel like air conditioning units in a lot of homes aren't as common. Of course, if you're booking a rental, you have some sort of control over that. But if you're buying a house in Spain, like I have, you would want to plan to make sure you have enough air conditioning for those really hot summer months, especially if you're planning on spending the summers there. Now, Florida is brutally hot in the summer as well, but I do feel like central air conditioning makes a bit of a difference there and just makes it a little bit easier. It's not a deal breaker, but I think that it's just one of the reasons that if I'm gonna have a hot summer, I'd prefer to spend it in Florida over Spain. Now, if you really love the beach and you're going to be staying right near the beach, I could see why you'd want to be in Spain in the summertime. I'm not saying that it's not for you. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons I make that decision. I do love the beach, but it's not something I'm doing daily. And going back just briefly to spending time in other countries, what I've ended up doing in a lot of my recent trips is that I book a stop on my way into Spain and on my way out of Spain. Where I live in Spain, I'm flying into Valencia or Alicante most of the time. And what that means is that I have to fly somewhere else because there are no direct flights from Orlando directly to Valencia or directly to Alicante. So that means I have to go somewhere first anyway. That's usually going to be Paris or Madrid for me. On occasion, it could be somewhere else like Amsterdam or London, although the taxes on flights to the UK are really high. I use points and miles a lot now, thanks to Katie's Travel Tricks, which you should check out her stuff if you ever have a chance. I fly generally just on points now, but when I'm booking those points flights, the one thing I do have to pay are the taxes. And which country you fly through determines how much those taxes on points flights are going to be. If I can get a flight that actually goes through Madrid rather than to France or the UK, then the taxes for me are generally a bit lower. When I fly through Madrid, I'm usually paying around $50 in taxes on points flights. But if I'm flying through Paris, I'm paying closer to 150 or 180. And then if I'm flying through London, it's usually going to be over $200 in taxes for those flights. So I obviously prefer Madrid, but I also really love to visit Paris. And so what I'll do is I'll make a stop somewhere, and instead of just having a quick layover, I'll stop and visit a city. So I've visited Paris a couple of times. I do like to visit some places in the UK, so that's an option if I'm willing to pay those higher taxes. And then after that, I can just book an easy flight with something like EasyJet or Ryanair or some of the other budget airlines that fly between cities in Europe. Many times those flights are between 50 and 100 euro, so it's really not bad. And then I get the joy of visiting other places without having to make a special trip for that. I'm kind of doing it on the way in or on the way out. Sometimes I also visit in the middle of my Spain trip. I'll either take a trip to somewhere else in Spain to check it out, or I'll visit Athens or Rome or any of these other like cities that are easy to fly in and out of for a quick trip. So the next thing I want to talk about is the reality of Spanish taxes and why you definitely don't want to overstay that 180 days, because if you are in Spain over, I think it's 183 days in a year, you are now a tax resident of Spain. And so, of course, if you're going to get a visa, you can become a tax resident of Spain. But one of the things that I'm avoiding by not becoming a resident in Spain are having to not only pay the higher Spanish taxes, but I'm also avoiding just the hassle of having to deal with taxes in two places. Because as a US citizen, I'm taxed on my worldwide income, even if I live in another country. And then in Spain, if I'm a resident there, I'm also taxed on my worldwide income. Now, there are treaties between the two countries to make sure that you're not paying double taxes, but it's just a lot more hassle when you're having to deal with having accountants in both places. I mean, I do have accountants in both places regardless, because you still have to pay taxes in Spain as a homeowner, but the process is a lot more simple when you're not dealing with income. And so that's one of the reasons I find that it's nice to come on these traveler visas versus becoming a resident of Spain. Now, the taxes in general are going to be significantly higher as a tax resident in Spain. And I'll say they offer a lot of great things in Spain that your taxes are going to, right? They've got great infrastructure. Their roads are really good, right? You have great health care, and there are a number of things that your taxes are going to pay for there. And the cost of living is a lot lower, so you can probably afford to be taxed a little bit higher there. However, if you don't have to go through that, that's sort of what I'm looking at now, because Both the US and the Spanish tax system are on a progressive scale, right? Like the first, for example, 20,000 that you earn a year is taxed at this rate, and then if you earn over that, the next bit of money that you earn is taxed at the next rate. And so it is significantly higher in Spain, especially because an income, for example, that would be more median in the US of around $60,000 a year is going to be seen as a much higher income in Spain. And so those tax brackets can get pretty high. And if I don't have to deal with paying income tax in two countries, it's just a lot less hassle. And one of the benefits of going about living between two countries versus being a resident in just one place. On this point of residency, one of the things I also want to mention is that by not becoming a resident in Spain, I've actually got quite a bit more freedom of movement. And what I mean by that is that as a citizen of the United States, I could travel all year. I could go away for a year and I'm still going to be a citizen and a resident here as long as I've got a property address here and that sort of thing. But I can go and travel as much as I want. Becoming a resident of Spain, I'm assuming this is just before you're a citizen. I'm not actually sure about that. But when you become a resident of Spain and you're on one of these visas, you're required to stay in Spain for 6 months or more out of the year. So I think it's that 183 days. You have to be in Spain. And so your movement is a little bit more limited if you wanted to be somewhere else for a certain period of time. I do think there was someone who appealed that or filed some sort of suit with the government and won, and there might be some changes to that in the future, but up till now, from what I understand, that has been the case. And so I really don't want to be limited on where I can be and when. And by avoiding becoming a resident there, that's really helping me to just have a lot more flexibility in my life about where I'm going to be. Okay, but while we're on taxes, let's talk about what taxes you pay as a non-resident of Spain, because if you buy a house in Spain, you're still going to have some taxes that you pay, and that's great because it helps to pay for the things that you are using there, right? So the first tax is an IBI tax, and it's basically going to be like your tax on owning a home. And that is generally going to be between 0.4 and 1.3% of the cadastral value of your home. Now, the cadastral value is sort of like if you're a US citizen and you own a home, and let's say you bought it for $200,000, but you pay taxes right on that house based on the way that it's valued by the government, which might be quite a bit less than what you actually pay for the home. So this is sort of the same thing. It's going to be usually around 30 to 40% less than the purchase price of a home, but not always exactly that. You can find out the cadastral value of a home, and then you can estimate what your taxes are going to be based on what region you're in. I would imagine that that plays into it. Because the properties I purchased are such low value properties, my IBI taxes are really low, usually around the €200 range per year. Then the next tax you're going to pay is the basura tax, which is like your rubbish or trash tax. In most places in Spain, rather than taking a garbage can to the end of your driveway like we do in a lot of places in the US, they are going to have these big trash and recycling bins at the end of most streets. I'm not actually sure how it works if you live like in the countryside or something, but for most people buying like a townhouse or an apartment in town, you're going to have these trash bins at the ends of each street where you carry your trash, and there is a trash like tax that you pay. I think it's usually between 80 and 170 euro per year, depending on where you live. But it's not super pricey, and it's something that you can have automated. The same as having your IBI automated, you can do that as well. And the last tax I want to talk about as a non-resident is actually the non-resident tax. I believe that's what it's referred to a lot. And this is a Form 210. So this is something you pay that is basically a rental income tax. It's assuming you have some imputed value by your house sitting there empty. And so even if you're not renting it and earning income, you're still sort of paying a tax as if you were. Now, if you are earning income, you just report that and you're paying a tax on that income. And then if you're not, you still have to have this form filled out and submitted every year. And this is something I have an accountant do. So my IBI and rubbish tax that I mentioned previously, those I have automated and they're just coming out same time of year every year. I'll get a notification telling me how much it is, usually around a month beforehand, and then it's just automatically debited from my bank account. But then this non-resident tax, you have an accountant that will file it for you. There's probably a way that you could do it yourself. I have an accountant do it. I pay usually between 80 and 100 euro per year to have them file it. And then I pay that non-resident income tax as well. Now, this is where things have been changing. And so I wanted to mention some new laws that have passed in, I think it was late 2025 and early 2026. Again, I am not a tax expert, so you definitely want to do your research, but there are some interesting changes here. If you've watched any of my videos previously, you've heard me talk about this non-resident income tax as being 24%, and that's flat on any income you earn if you're renting out your property while you're away, or maybe you just own a home as a non-resident and you're renting it out all the time. So you have to pay 24% right off the top. And there were no deductions. So you couldn't deduct things that you would, like in the US, we get deductions. If you are running your property as a business, you would usually be able to deduct things like maybe the electricity or what you pay a property manager, or a number of things that you do to care for this property that you're running like a business. Well, in Spain, for non-residents at least, I'm not really sure how that was working for folks who were residents of the EU. Oh, and that's another distinction. This is for non-residents of the European Union, not just non-residents of Spain. So if you lived anywhere within the EU, you got the lower tax rate of 19%, and then if you were outside of the EU, you paid the higher tax rate of 24% and no deductions. And so you really had to factor that in if you were going to rent out a property. Like, that takes a lot right off the top without being able to deduct anything. So you'd have to, of course, see if that was going to be profitable for you if you were running it as a business. So in November of 2025, the Supreme Court ruled that they could not apply restrictive tax treatments to a certain group of people, which was a big win, right? Like, I believe that meant that it was supposed to be dropping to the same 19%, and possibly that you could be doing deductions as well. However, there is sort of a lag here, right? Because I think they're expecting that this will be appealed. And then because of that, I don't believe it's actually being used yet. Like, people are still currently having to pay the 24%. However, I think they're encouraging people to save all of their records because they could end up being due a refund. So kind of have to see how all this plays out over time. For now, I think you should plan to continue paying that 24%. Oh, and let's go back to that for 1 second, because we're talking about 24% on the cadastral value of the home. Remember how earlier we talked about the cadastral value? It's that lower home value that's assessed by the government. The 24% you're paying is based on a percentage of the cadastral value of the home. And so you can do calculations to figure out what that would be based on what the cadastral value is of the home that you're looking to purchase or that you currently own. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is whether or not you want to buy or rent transportation. And that's if you need transportation at all. Because of course, in a country like Spain, in Europe, you're going to have, generally speaking, really great public transportation. And that is especially true if you're going to live in a big city. Generally speaking, all of these places, you're going to be able to get around with public transportation, and you can even take trains between a lot of those big cities. The thing is that if you get out into the smaller towns like mine or the coastal towns, it might be a lot easier to have a car at that point, especially because you may want to be visiting other places. Like, I don't need a car when I'm in my town, but I do need a car when I want to leave my town. There are a couple of bus routes and there are a couple of taxis, but in general, that's not really going to work. So you either need to be ready to kind of be in your town all the time, or you're going to probably need some sort of mode of transportation. Now, I've actually done both. I rented cars for quite a long time, then I owned a car for a few years, and then I recently sold the car and went back to renting. And so I'll explain what I think about both of these. And I really think it just depends on so many factors and how they really affect you. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the reasons that I like renting a car. First of all, it's something I can pick up directly from the airport, right? So I'm not having to figure out how to get to my town where my car is. The other thing is that, of course, you never have worries about things like maintenance or anything like that. And then one of the reasons I've liked renting a car in Spain is that it can be really inexpensive, and that can vary. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. But when I first went to Spain, I rented a car for 13 days and I was paying less than $1 a day. I kid you not. I kept thinking, like, is this real? Like, is this really going to be there when I show up? But it was. And I really just couldn't believe the price. Now, all of my car rentals haven't been that inexpensive, and we'll get into that a little bit. But let's also talk about some of the reasons you may want to own a car. I think some people, if you have adult children who are maybe driving but aren't over the age of 25, or maybe it's even 30 with some car rental companies, insurance expenses could be a lot more. And so maybe owning a car is better if you're going to be staying in Spain for any long period of time. And maybe also if you're going to be visiting regularly during tourist seasons when car rentals would be a lot more expensive. Another reason might be if you don't own a home in Spain or you don't have a long-term rental contract to be staying like at an Airbnb or some other kind of home rental, because you don't need to be a resident to own a car, but you do have to either own a home or have a long-term rental contract that I think is at least a year. And so if you don't have one of those, you're going to have to rent a car anyway. But if you do have, for example, a home like what I have, it is actually pretty easy to purchase a car. So let me talk to you through some of my scenarios because that will help me describe what some of this has looked like for me. For the first maybe year or so, that's when I was renting a car. And the prices were really, really inexpensive. But there was this one particular year, I think it was 2019, I happened to be there over the Christmas holiday, and I'm not usually there over Christmas. And I looked at a car rental. I was definitely going to need one, and I think it was for somewhere like 10 days or maybe 2 weeks, but it was going to be $600 or 600 euro. And that was just astronomical in comparison to what I would usually be paying. Remember, I was used to like between $1 and $10 a day. So it was just insanely expensive, relatively speaking. Of course, in the US, that would seem like nothing, but I would never rent a car for that long in the US, right? So it was just like understanding what I could afford. And then I was like, well, how much does it cost to buy a car? So I started looking for used cars and I found a really good deal on an older Honda CRV. And I'm talking like 20 years old at that point. But that was okay for me. It was in mint condition. I got a really great deal and I was able to purchase that car. And I loved that Honda, and it went a lot of places with me. I went to Portugal in that car. I drove to Andorra. I've been all over. And it was a great vehicle. Now, let's talk about the costs when you own a car and the things you have to think about, right? So, one of your costs is going to be your road tax. I paid about 150 euro per year. I'm not exactly sure what that's based on, and I'm sure it has something to do with your local municipality, but there will be some kind of road tax. and it's very easy to pay. You can have it automated through the SUMA office, which is like the local tax office. The next thing you obviously need to consider is car insurance. Mine ran about €300 per year. I had mine through Abigate, which is an English company that sells insurance in Spain. They were really great, and I felt like the price was really reasonable. The next cost is going to be your ITV. I honestly don't remember exactly how much it is, and this might vary between region, but it's, I think, less than €100 for sure. Well, I say for sure, and I'm not actually for sure, but it's not super expensive, so it's affordable. So you have to have these ITV appointments and get an inspection once per year. It's not really all that easy. There have been a lot of website issues, at least ones that I've had, trying to get an appointment booked. You often have to book months in advance, especially for the centers that are right around like more touristy areas where you have a lot of people coming in and out. And that would be intensified during times that are more popular for people to be coming back to Spain to spend time in their vacation homes, or, that sort of thing. So that was like a partial annoyance, having to do that like every other time I come to Spain and figuring out the appointments, especially when things were really busy, but still like manageable. So for me, the one thing that kind of became the deal breaker was getting maintenance done on my car, or not just maintenance, but if I needed a repair. And it's not that the repairs would be that serious, it's that the mechanics are really backed up. And again, people in Spain tend to have this very laid back lifestyle where there's not a lot of sense of urgency. Just for example, there were a couple of times, like one time I took my car in for a relatively minor repair, had to wait a couple of days for a part, and then I didn't really hear from them, but I wasn't in a super big hurry. Like, I didn't need a car that day. I don't drive a lot at all when I'm in my town, so I'm only using it if I'm going somewhere on the weekends. Well, I end up waiting until Friday that week, and I suddenly get a text from them a little after lunchtime saying that the shop is closing down for the next 2 weeks and all of them are going on vacation. The whole shop, it's just closed, and it's starting in like 30 minutes. So by the time I even saw the message, they were already closed and I couldn't get my car. And that, I just can't tell you how common that sort of thing is. And so then I end up having to rent a car anyway. Then the next time I come to town, that one mechanic wasn't even available, take it to another mechanic, and I'm on this long waiting list. And it was just the amount of time it was taking, and then having to rent a car anyway sort of defeated the purpose of owning a car. Now, you could buy a much newer car, and I think that kind of situation might actually be a lot more worthwhile, where you're not having to depend on mechanics being available. Not that newer cars never need repairs, but it's probably less frequent than it would be with older cars. So that really honestly is the only reason I decided to sell the car, because I was like, I have to rent a car anyway. So I'm paying twice now, and I'm not here often enough to make that worth my while. So I was able to sell my car to a sweet friend, and so I still get to see it all the time because I loved that Honda. Oh my goodness, it was just such a great little car. And so I've gone back to renting cars, which has been interesting because the prices have definitely gone up recently. I think in general, probably around the world, we're just seeing inflation, right? We've had a lot of inflation in the US. Same thing is happening in Spain. Prices are going up on homes, prices are going up on rental cars. I even recently went out for dinner at a Thai restaurant. I was in Denia, and the dishes cost more than what I pay at a touristy area in the United States, which was a little bit shocking to me. Like, I hadn't seen that a lot. Now, that's not going to be common outside of the tourist areas, but I was really surprised at some of the food prices going up. So, anyway, all that to say, rental car prices have gone up, and I'm definitely paying more than what I used to pay, but still, relatively to the US, it's been a lot less. Now, let me talk for a minute about how I navigate finding deals. First of all, there's an incredible website that I use. I'm an affiliate of theirs. I would love it if you use my link if you decide to go rent a car. I have been using them now for the last couple of years, and they're incredible. One of the reasons I like them is they're really good at identifying what car rental companies are rated well. And so I only go with the ones that have really good ratings from them. The next thing I like about them is they're really transparent, not just about their own fees, but also everything that the car rental company is going to be charging you. Like, for example, I had some rentals recently that had one-way fees. That's all built in. There aren't any surprises when I get to the counter, so I really like that. Another thing that I like about them is that if you do need insurance, they offer insurance that you can buy when you're renting the car online, and it is so much less than what you'd pay at the counter. Now, I don't personally take out car insurance, and I don't because I use some high-end credit cards from the US that offer primary rental car insurance, not the secondary coverage, the primary coverage. And so that has been a huge benefit for me so that I don't need to do that. I also know some people that take out private car rental insurance for their rental cars. So rather than like going through the company at the counter, they've called an insurance company in advance and gotten covered for the time that they're going to be driving the car. Now, I don't know all the details about that because I don't use that specifically, but there are just different options for you. But here is another way that I save. For example, on this last trip to Spain, I was there about 2 months. I ended up renting 3 cars over that period of time. And here's why. First of all, I would prefer to just rent one car the whole time because it's a lot easier. But if there's any reason I'm going to be going to an airport, maybe it's to pick up a friend, maybe it's to drop off a friend, whether it's the Valencia or the Alicante airport, I will look at, rather than like an entire 2 months of renting a car, I will look at, okay, if I'm going here to this place, I could return the one car and pick up a new one. And what are the cost differences if I break this up a little bit? Obviously, that wouldn't be worth it to save $10 or even $50, maybe even $100 wouldn't be worth it. But what I have found, like for example, on this recent trip, I had initially booked I think it was about a 1 month car rental for the latter half of my trip. And I was picking up in Valencia and returning to Valencia on the day that I was flying out. But then at some point, I remembered that I was taking a friend to the Alicante airport. And I thought, let me just look and see. And I checked prices if I were to return the first car after 3 weeks instead of 4 weeks. But instead of returning it in Valencia, I would return it in Alicante where I took her. So that meant I would need to pay a one-way fee because I'm returning to a different airport. Then I'm going to pick up a new car in Alicante and I'm going to drive that for 1 week and I'm going to return that one in Valencia. So I'm also going to have to pay a one-way fee. But just let me see what the price difference is going to be if I go ahead and swap out those cars. Well, it turned out that I saved somewhere around $200 or $300, and that was just because of the availability at the time. Even once you included the one-way fees, I was saving $200 to $300, and that was totally worth it. And it's also kind of nice because, the cars get dirty after a couple of weeks, not on the inside because I do keep them pretty clean, but on the outside they get dirty, and it's nice to just swap it out and get a fresh, brand new car. So for me, that has been worth it in certain circumstances. I'll check things like even returning a different time of day can get you a different price. So I'll really play with the pricing quite a bit just to find out if I can save something substantial because it can really be worth it. I have found that the sweet spot for rentals is between 1 and 3 weeks. And once I get over that 3 week mark is where things really start to get a bit more pricey. However, sometimes it's worth it to pay a little bit more so that you don't have to hassle with a lot. So it really just kind of depends on what kind of pricing you're looking at, whether or not you're making airport runs anyway, and you can really play with a lot of that to figure out how to get the best deals. I do think if you are traveling during the tourist season, though, it's probably going to just be quite a bit more expensive. And whether you decide to buy a vehicle outright and pay for the ongoing insurance and taxes, or you choose to book month-long car rentals like I do, keeping your transportation funded is just another regular, predictable expense that you can manage seamlessly and affordably by transferring your money from the US using your Wise account. I actually had to do this during one of my last rental cars that I did on this last trip to Spain. I was booking through Centauro in Valencia, and I go to the counter to pay, and I always bring a few different credit cards with me just in case, but none of them were working. And it wasn't a problem with my credit cards. I had more than enough space on the credit cards. I can spend a lot on them without any problems, but there was something about their system that was struggling with US credit cards, and I don't know why. And I've booked through them many times and never had this problem. So this was new, and I was really irritated. But one of the things that I happened to have with me was my Spanish bank account debit card. And I said, "Can I put this on my debit card?" And he said, "Yes, but my deposit was like 1,500 euros." So I was like, "Well, I don't have 1,500 euro in that account." And that is where Wise really came in handy because I needed to make an instant transfer, which I can do with Wise, and it doesn't cost you anything extra to make an instant transfer. That's just how fast they are. So I had to make two different transfers from two different US bank accounts. I send that money over to the account, it's there instantly, and then I can book the rental car with the debit card. And so for me, Wise absolutely saved the day, and that's just one of the ways that it can come in really handy. Okay, now let's briefly talk about utilities and security, right? So you've got your basic utilities, your electricity, your water, your internet. For electricity, I am generally paying around 100 euro a month when I'm in Spain. When I'm not there, it can be as low as 15 euro a month, just depending. Of course, those rates are going to range depending on how big your home is, what communities you live in, that sort of thing. But I would say it's fairly comparable to what I pay in the US for electricity specifically. Then you have water, which I find to be quite a bit less. I generally pay around 35 to 40 euro per quarter for my water bills. And then for internet, I pay only 25 euro a month for high-speed fiber optic Wi-Fi. It has been incredible. It was not like that when I first moved to Spain, but man, the internet has improved. It's way better than what I use in the US, and it's less than a third of what I pay in the US. So it's incredible. And the reason why this ties in with security is that in order to have security cameras running that you can monitor at any time, you're going to need Wi-Fi, and you're also going to need electricity for that. So I think it's really important to keep all of your utilities running, if even just for security, especially considering the very nominal cost. One of the big things in Spain that you've probably heard about, squatting is a really big deal there. And there, I think it's called Occupus. I've done a whole video all about that. But a short version of that is that the laws really favor the squatters. So if someone does happen to break into your home, which I personally don't find to be that big of a threat. I mean, it would be a pain if it happened to you, but I find that you can take a lot of steps to have deterrents that are going to prevent that from happening. And one of those things is having security cameras, right? Like that's going to be really helpful, especially if you can monitor them. Now, a lot of people pay for home security, and you can do that too. There are a lot of great options out there. For me, I ended up installing 4 different cameras that I purchased from Amazon, and I use an app on my phone, and anytime there is any motion in front of any one of those cameras, it sends a notification directly to my phone, and I get it no matter where I am in the world, and I can go to a live feed of that video. Not only can I see the video, but it also has a microphone on it, so I can speak to someone there in the room. It's really fun to kind of like scare your friends if they happen to be in your house, and you can pop up and be like, boo. Anyway, um, the cameras are really great. Again, I bought them on Amazon, maybe like 20, $30 each, something like that. So for less than 100 euro, I've got a camera facing every entry point of my house. And that just gives me a lot of peace of mind because I know that I can respond quickly with either the police or friends if my home happened to be broken into. It's not something I worry about a lot, but having the cameras definitely gives me extra peace of mind, and that's something that you can definitely set up pretty easily at your property. If you don't have fiber optic Wi-Fi available in your area, Starlink is another option in Spain, and it's a lot more affordable in Spain than it is in the US for the exact same service. So that's kind of nice. Other security options, having metal gates and like bars on your windows and doors. I know it's not popular in the US, but it's just kind of a normal part of home decor in Spain. Having bars on your windows and doors, it's just kind of everywhere. Then another great thing to have is insurance. You can get insurance through your bank. It's really not all that expensive, but an even less expensive option are some of the newer digital first companies where you can just go online and really easily purchase and set up your insurance. So you can look for that too. And then the last thing is really having a great community presence, knowing your neighbors. I am friends with so many of my neighbors. We have a WhatsApp group on our street, and we don't use it to chat a whole lot, but anytime something's coming up in the town, or if there's something that's been a nuisance on our street, or there's some sort of security concern, the neighbors are all over it, and we just all communicate and help each other, and it's a great way to make sure our homes are being cared for. So I really encourage you to get to know your neighbors and your community. Okay, and the last big thing I want to talk about is just the cultural and emotional shift, because you definitely kind of go through this a couple times a year as you're coming and going from different places. I've done a lot of travel in my life, and I just like to say that culture shock is real, so is reverse culture shock. And sometimes you can even have some of those feelings, even when it's places that you've come and gone from a whole lot. There are definitely elements of culture shock when you go to Spain, and it's not necessarily like a whole bunch of bad things, but things are just different, right? And you're not quite used to it. Even if you're familiar with what it is, it can be like, oh yeah, like I need to get back into the swing of this. And then coming back to the US, I often have culture shock here, especially when I get on the roads. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but something about driving when I get back to the US that just like makes me go bonkers. And I think it's because the culture in Spain is that they abide by the rules of the road. For some reason, passing, like overtaking someone on the highway, in the US, people are going to just do what they want when they want. They're going to pass you any which way. They're only thinking about themselves. That's just how we drive. It's like that very individualistic culture. In Spain, you only pass on the left. You're never going to overtake someone on the right. And if you're hanging out in the left lane, they're going to get behind you. Even if they could pass you in the right lane, they're going to sit behind you and they're going to flash you until you move over and you start obeying the rules of the road. And so once you've been in a culture that's doing that for a few months, and then you go back to the US and you have people just driving without any consideration for anyone else, that kind of thing is really a lot to process. And so I go through that every time I come back to the US. I'm frustrated just on the drive home. But at the same time, there are really wonderful things about our different cultures, and you really can't have it all. So, what I've learned is that I want to lean into those joys that I find in each place. When I go to Spain, I can't wait to sit at a table with a friend and just have a cup of coffee and not look at my watch and not look at my phone and just enjoy that relational time. That's something that does not happen often in the US. If you actually sit down to have a cup of coffee with someone, if they did not look at their phone during that time, it almost feels like it would be odd. But that's one of the things I love about Spain. And so I really lean into that there. But when I come back here to the US, there are things that I really lean into here. And one of the cool things about living this life between two places is that you never have the time to really take one for granted. I feel like if you live in just one culture all the time, you can really take it for granted. You don't realize how much you appreciate certain things. Like in the US, convenience is a really big thing. And as much as a lot of the trade offs in Spain are worth it, the convenience is still really nice. So it's something I appreciate more after having spent time in Spain. And when I'm in the US, there are things about Spain that I continue to appreciate that if I lived in Spain all the time, I might take for granted. So that's something really beautiful about the process. It doesn't make it always easy, right? There are things about changing between cultures that are always going to kind of take a minute. But after a while, you're really prepared for it. You know what's going to happen. You can intentionally think about the shift and what's going to happen when you go home to your other home. It is really fun to have two entirely different wardrobes, like one on one continent and one on another. Like, what a privilege to be able to have that. So there are fun little things like that that you really kind of come to enjoy. I'm such a forgetful person. I've only been home in the US now for a couple of days, and I'll be like, oh, I forgot about those shoes. Or, it's just funny little things that you don't even realize, but I get to be excited about them all over again. So I would just say really lean into the joys, and I think you'll find that to be most rewarding. So again, I don't know what your plan is, whether you're looking to buy a fixer-upper and work on it for a couple of years like I did, or you're maybe buying a $500,000 villa on the beach, like, wow, lucky you, how amazing. But regardless of what your plans are, and whether or not you're going to come and go like I do, or you're looking to do residency in Spain and stay there for the long haul, you can do this. Just make sure you spend time doing your research to learn about the culture, different legalities, and then, of course, the cost. Remember, moving large amounts of money internationally doesn't have to be stressful or expensive when you use Wise. It's a secure platform that helps you manage your international transfers. Don't forget to use my link in the description and pinned in the comments to get your first fee-free transfer up to 600 US dollars the next time you need to safely and affordably move money abroad. So tell me, is there anything holding you back? Are you on this journey? Where in your journey are you? I would love to hear about it in the comments and talk with you there. We have such a great community of people. I always appreciate all your ideas, your reminders if I've forgotten to mention something that might be helpful to everyone else. If you are looking to buy a home in Spain and you are feeling unsure about a lot of things and you want some personal input, you can book a one-on-one coaching session with me at traveltommoney.com/coaching. I would love to meet with you and hear your story and help you navigate some of that process. Thanks so much for being here today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join me every day where travel and adventure build financial freedom. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.